Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Terror Radio Podcast. If this is your first time joining me, then welcome. This is a podcast dedicated in bringing you the best of horror and thriller, old-time radio broadcasts, as well as original stories. I'm your host, Keith, aka the Radio Show Nerd, and tonight's episode is entitled Spectres, Nightmares, and Insanity. So, without further ado, this is Terror Radio. The two radio series highlighted tonight are Black Mass and The Weird Circle. Our first radio play is an adaptation of Henry James' short story, Jolly Corner, which was first broadcasted on the Black Mass, January 7th, 1965. Following that is the radio play, What Is It? And this is an adaptation of James O'Brien's short story. And this was first broadcasted on The Weird Circle, October 10th, 1943. And I added a bonus radio play, Friday, from Suspense, which was broadcasted on February 4th, 1962, in honor of Friday the 13th. So, you all know the drill. Sit back, turn down the lights, and listen to Jolly Corner, followed by What Is It? And concluding with Friday.
Welcome to the Black Mass. We present an adaptation for radio of The Jolly Corner by Henry James.
I know it's only a detail, Denver, but let's stick to the plan. No harm so far, but it's good we caught it in time. All right. We'll meet in the morning for another look. All right, then.
Careful there, Alice. I'm sorry I had to stop, but you know you have to keep watch.
I'm impressed.
Impressed?
The way you stood up. Think of it. All these years you may have neglected your real gift.
Building skyscrapers?
Yes, if you had stayed in America, you may have discovered your real genius.
Adding more awful architecture to all this bigness.
Do you find it all really more awful now?
Ah, they were ugly enough then, I remember. But with some charm. Now, proportions and values are upside down. The modern is monstrous.
But you're here. And that's what you think of everything.
Everything. That's too much. I dodge the question. Everything has somehow been a surprise, but even so, my thoughts are almost altogether about something that concerns only myself.
Your property?
Yes. Yes, exactly. I had to come back eventually to look after my property. This new monster is only a renovation. The apartment has flourished all along. I've managed to live for more than 30 years in Europe on the leases. My back turned. Now I've had no trouble catching on. Climbing ladders, learning about materials, looking wise. It's actually been charming, amusing, catching on to it this way.
Well, you're going to be well off for it, too. Astonishingly much, I should say. You can turn your back again.
Well, I don't know yet.
You mean you'll live here, in one of your marble towers?
Oh, never. I have my other property, you know.
Oh, yes, the old place, you mean, on the corner. I wondered if you'd kept it.
You kept it? Oh, yes, I've kept it. It's for that, I think, really, that I returned. I yielded to a humor I've had.
It hasn't changed.
Oh.
I've passed now and again. It's still as it was, except that it's empty. The corner has changed, I'm afraid.
Ah, yes, the corner. The Jolly Corner. I called it that, and it was. I was very fond of it as a child. The happy years growing up there. Finally, after my brothers died, the property came wholly into my hands. Yes, I suppose it was to see my house on the Jolly Corner again, as much as anything, that I came back.
Are we walking there now? I was hoping you'd show me.
Do you mind if we stop for a moment? Would you like to see it?
Oh, of course. Is it really empty all this while?
Entirely. Except for Mrs. Muldoon, good woman who lives in the neighborhood. She comes by every day to open windows and dust and sweep.
Oh, it must have been her I saw once when I passed.
No doubt. Do you pass often?
Oh, now and then, to get to the downtown.
You see? Empty. Empty. Vacancy reigns from top to bottom.
Oh, who's there? Is it you, Mr. Bryden?
Yes, it's me, Mrs. Muldoon. I brought a visitor.
Oh, you gave me your start, you did. Ma'am?
This is Miss Staverton.
Hello, Mrs. Muldoon.
Don't let us interrupt, Mrs. Muldoon. We're just going to look about.
There's no trouble, Mr. Bryden. I know you usually come later in the day. But let me push back some of the shutters and let in some light. Oh, to show you, sir, how little there is to see, I'm afraid.
The rooms are enormous.
Too large, I'm afraid, for the times. For me.
Unless you were a billionaire.
Ah, yes. Had I but stayed at home and invented skyscrapers.
The dining room is off there. But if you will, you can look down here later. It's my noonday round before leaving, and I can open up for you upstairs.
Oh, don't bother about us, Mrs. Muldoon. We'll just walk about.
Oh, no bother at all, Mr. Bryden. I'm only too glad to oblige. There's only one request I hope you never make of me, sir.
Well, and what's that?
Oh, well, if you should wish for any reason to come in after dark, I would just have to tell you, if you please, but you must ask it of someone else.
You mean there are things to see, then?
It's what you might see, miss. And I put it to you that no lady could be expected to like scraping up to them top stories in the evil hours, could she?
Evil hours?
What with the gas and electricity off, they're evil enough. I've sometimes been late enough to need a taper, and it's been a gruesome march through all them grey rooms.
I can imagine it, Mrs. Muldoon.
What do you imagine? Ghosts? Do you imagine my Jolly Corner is haunted? Well, there'd be nothing to fear.
Maybe. But I'm not of a mind to find that out, Mr. Bryden. Now, I'll go ahead and open things and leave you to your own. Then I must go off if you'll not be needing anything.
Thanks, Mrs. Muldoon. I'll lock up when we leave.
Ma'am?
There used to be a fine view here of the river. There you can still see a slice of it between the buildings.
10 stories higher, you'd have your view again. I suppose that's what they want. To pull this place to pieces and start up.
It's exactly what they want. They're at me daily. They can for their lives understand a man's liability to decent feelings. There are, after all, other values.
In short, you're to make so good a thing of your skyscraper that those ill-gotten gains will afford you to be sentimental here.
Well, yes, exactly. But is it sentimental? No, it's more. It searches me as I wander about.
Oh, you prowl?
Mere sight of the walls, shapes of the rooms, sound of the floors. This old silver-plated knob. I hold it and feel the slightest pressure of other palms. Dead ones now. 70 years of the past. The ashes of my youth still afloat in the air. Well, I thought I had forgotten.
But you can live here again if you decide to stay on.
I might have lived here. I might have put in here all these years. Then everything would have been different enough. But that's another matter, and I can't now. And so the beauty of it, of my perversity, my refusal to tear it down, is the total absence of a reason. If there were reason, it would have to be a matter of dollars. So we'll have none, not the ghost of one.
Are you very sure that the ghost of one doesn't, sir?
Oh, ghosts. Of course the place must swarm with them. I should be ashamed of it if it didn't. Poor Mrs. Muldoon's right, and it's why I haven't asked her to do more than look in.
Well, if it were only furnished and lived in.
For me, it is lived in. For me, it is furnished.
Yes.
Well, this old elm lives on.
What a charming garden.
The memory is so alive. So alive. Mother, father, my dear sister, that was her room up there with the balcony. I've seen her 1,000 times sitting there, looking down, calling. My brothers, they're all gone, simply having run their course, having met their end one way or another.
And what would have become of you?
Yes. All things come back to that. What might I have been? What course would I have run? An absurd, but I must admit, an intense speculation.
A morbid obsession?
What would it have made of me? What? I keep forever thinking about it. Idiotically, how could I possibly know?
Well, you see what it has made of others.
Something. Would it have made something of me?
Well, you're something else.
Oh, Alice, I'm nothing. Nothing. Nothing at all.
You followed your own preference. That's something.
Yes, Europe. Europe, running off. I liked it, I loved it. If I'd only the least doubt, I would have stuck it out here. But I was too young, 27. That small, tight bud transplanted to a climate that blighted him once and for all.
You wonder about the flower. So do I. I've been wondering these several weeks. I believe in the flower. It would have been quite splendid, quite huge and monstrous.
Monstrous. Monstrous above all. And I imagine by the same stroke quite hideous and offensive.
You don't believe that. If you did, you wouldn't wonder. You'd know, and that would be enough for you. What you feel, and what I feel for you, is that you'd have had power.
You'd have liked me that way?
How should I not have liked you?
I see. You'd have liked me, preferred me, a billionaire.
How should I not have liked you?
Well, I know at least what I am. I've not been edifying. I believe I'm thought in 100 quarters to have been barely decent. I followed strange paths and worshipped strange gods. It must have come to you again and again. In fact, you've admitted as much, that I was leading all these 30 years a selfish, frivolous, scandalous life. And you see what it has made of me.
You see what it has made of me.
Oh, you're a person whom nothing could have altered. You were born to be what you are, anywhere, anyway. You've the perfection nothing else could have blighted. If I hadn't left, Don't you see how I'd never have waited till now?
The great thing to see seems to me to be that it hasn't spoiled anything. It hasn't spoiled your being here at last. It hasn't spoiled this. It hasn't spoiled your speaking or...
Do you believe, then, that I am as good as I might have been?
Oh, no, far from it. But I don't care.
You mean that I'm good enough?
Will you believe it if I say so? I mean, will you let that settle the question for you?
There's an idea. Some idea which, however absurd, I cannot yet bargain away.
Oh, you see, you don't care either, but very differently. You don't care for anything but yourself.
Exactly. But he isn't myself. He's the just so totally other person. But I do want to see him. And I can. And I shall.
Yes, you shall. Well, in any case, I've seen him.
You?
I've seen him in a dream.
Oh, a dream.
But twice. I saw him as I see you now.
You've dreamed the same dream?
Twice over. The very same.
You dream about me at that rate?
Ah, about him.
Then you know all about him. Well, what's the wretch like?
I'll tell you sometime. Some other time.
It was after that visit with Alice that there was most of a virtue for me in surrender to my obsession. I sometimes came twice in the 24 hours. I projected myself all day, straight over the bristling line of hard, unconscious heads, and into the other, the real, the waiting life. The moments I liked best were those of gathering dusk, of the short autumn twilight. The time which again and again I found myself hoping most. Listening. Feeling my attention, never before so fine, on the pulse of the great, vague place. I always caught the effect of the steel point of my stick on the old marble of the hall pavement, on the black and white squares, where I played once, long ago. A dim, reverberating tinkle from the depths of the house, of the past, of that mystical other world that might have flourished for me had I not abandoned it. I'd put my stick noiselessly away in a corner. Then feel the place in the lightness of some great glass bowl, all precious concave crystal, set delicately humming by the play of a moist finger round its edge. The concave crystal held this mystical otherworld, and the murmur of its rim was the sigh there, the scarce audible pathetic wail of all the baffled, forsworn possibilities. What I did was to wake them. They were shy, all but unappeasably shy, but they weren't really sinister. At least, not before they had taken the form I so yearned to make them take. The form I hunted. Hunted from room to room, story to story. Long after midnight, with my glimmering light, moving it slowly, holding it high. And he would roam restlessly too. When I stopped, I could hear him. He was cautious, shifty. His evasion laying on me finally a rigor to which nothing in my life has been comparable. No pleasure as fine as this tension. No sport demanding the patience and nerve of this stalking a creature more subtle, more formidable than any beast of the forest. I'd place my light on some mantel shelf, step back into a shelter or shade as if a rock or tree, holding my breath, living in the joy of the instant. With habit and repetition, I gained to an extraordinary degree the power to penetrate the distances, the darkness of corners, to resolve back into their innocence the treacheries of uncertain light, the evil-looking forms taken in the gloom by mere shadows, by accidents of the air, by shifting effects of perspective. Putting down my light, I could still wander on without it, pass into other rooms, see my way, visually project a comparative clearness. It made me feel this acquired faculty like some monstrous stealthy cat. I wondered if I would have glared at these moments with large shining yellow eyes, and what it would be for my poor hard-pressed alter ego to be confronted with such a creature. Apparitions. Oh, apparitions. People have been in terror of apparitions, but who had ever before so turned the tables and become himself in the apparitional world an incalculable terror? I liked the open shutters. I opened everywhere those Mrs. Muldoon had closed, closing them as carefully afterward. I liked, and above all in the upper rooms, the sense of the hard silver of the autumn stars through the window panes, the flare of the street lamps below. That was human, actual, social, the world I had lived in. That light supported me mostly in the rooms to the front and the prolonged side, though it failed me in the central shades and the part at the back. There the house was the very jungle of my prey. The place was more subdivided there. Small rooms for servants had been multiplied, nooks and corners abounded, and there was a back staircase over which I leaned many a time to look far down. My whole perception was open to cultivation, bringing it to perfection by practice, grown already so fine that I could hear. Well, there was something unmistakable. I felt it as I walked. I was being kept in sight, tracked at a distance, so that I should appear less arrogantly to myself merely to pursue. I'd make abrupt turns, wheel about, stop, seek it out. I had kept vistas clear, doors open, so that in the darkness my imagination might almost achieve it, project it, project into it. A refinement, a beauty. I had known 50 times the start of perception that had afterwards dropped, had 50 times gasped, there, under some fond, brief hallucination. But he'd retreat. though he retreated more reluctantly as time went on. Then, finally, one night, at the top among the more intricate rooms, he was there. He was there waiting, not falling back, waiting at the far end of a series of rooms I had just passed through, waiting, worked up finally to anger, ready to fight. Thus we stood, both terror and what? Rejoicing. Terror, but also relief that in that other form I could inspire such fear. Thus we were one and the same. The door between the rooms was open, and from a second another opened to a third. But there the chain ended. The third door, which had only moments before been indubitably open, had subsequently been closed. I stood before it. The question of danger loomed, and with it as never before the question of courage. For what I knew the blank face of the door to say was, show us how much you have. Show us how much you have. It glared back at me with that challenge, and he behind it shut up, defiant, turning the situation. Oh, discretion. Discretion. It could take its time. But at the threshold, this hunger so close to being met, it was amazing, but also exquisite and rare that insistence should have quite dropped from me. Discretion. Discretion. Could it save the situation? I wouldn't touch the door. I wouldn't touch it. I'd only wait a little to show, to prove that I wouldn't. I listened, as if there was something to hear. And this attitude between us, while it lasted, was its own communication. If you won't, then good, I spare you. I give up. We both should have suffered. I retire, never to try again. So rest forever. Rest and let me. I turned away. I turned away. I turned away and retraced my steps. And finally, at the other side of the house, I did what I had never done at these hours. I opened half a casement and let in the air of the night. Spell was now broken, and it didn't matter. The empty street. Its other life, so marked even by the great lamplit vacancy, was within call, within touch. High above I watched, as for some comforting common fact, some vulgar human note, a scavenger, a thief, some night bird I would have blessed, positively welcomed that sign of life. But nothing. Oh, nothing. Discretion even there. Not the least stir of the great grim hush. The life of the town was itself discreet, under a spell. Great builded voids. Have they ever spoken so little to any need of the spirit? Great crowded stillnesses with its sinister mask. Oh, it was this large collective negation that proved to me at last what a night I had made of it. I thought, of course, of retracing my steps. There was, after all, the whole rest of the house to traverse for me to leave safely. Safely. Unless the door had meanwhile opened, and he was once more at large and in possession. But if I saw the door open, if I saw it, it would send me straight to this window and make my way uncontrollably, insanely, fatally to the street. No, I wouldn't look. That hideous chance I avert only by recoiling in time from assurance. Assurance. I have the whole house now to deal with. My instinct is all for mildness, but I ran through the rooms, the passages, to finally the top of the stairs. Mildness, yes, I take it all with no rush. No rush, but quite steadily. The house seems immense. The scale of space inordinate. They might come in now, the builders, the destroyers, they might come as soon as they want. Do you hear, all you rooms, all you steps and flights? The wreckers will have you. The wreckers will have you a splintered pile. I descended as if to the bottom of the sea. The last flight to the lower hall. Oh, there, the marble floor. The squares, black and white, of my childhood. Only to cross these once more to the door to safety. To safety. The vestibule gaped wide. The inner door had been thrown far back. That one I had closed. Oh, at last, he, to meet, to touch, to know. The penumbra, dense and dark, was the virtual screen of a figure which stood in it as still as some image erect in a niche, or as some black-visored sentinel guarding a treasure. A treasure. My liberation. Oh, my supreme defeat. Gray, glimmering margin. The central vagueness diminishing, taking form. It was somebody, something. What made the face dim was a pair of raised hands that covered it, buried it. The head was bent. The figure wore evening dress of gleaming silk lappet and white linen, pearl buttons, gold watchguard, polished shoes. A pair of thick eyeglasses hung from a string. My revulsion had become immense. He hides his face from seeing. Standing there for the achieved, the enjoyed, the triumphant life, yet he can't bear to be faced. Wasn't the proof in the covering hands? The hand. So spread that I could see that one of the hands had lost 2 fingers. They were reduced to stumps as if accidentally shot away. But even so, the face was guarded and saved. Coward, show yourself! No, it isn't mine. It isn't me. It is hideous, monstrous. It fits me at no point. Imposter! The face is that of a stranger. It approaches, comes upon me nearer. He is evil, odious, blatant, and vulgar. He advances as for aggression, and I, sick with the force of his shock, fall back under this life larger than my own, this rage of personality under which my own collapses, turns to darkness, gives way, is gone.
Mr. Bryden. Mr. Bryden. Oh, ma'am. He's coming round, I think. Mr. Bryden, sir. You gave us a scare, you did.
Mrs. Muldoon, he'll be all right. Would you fix something?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I'll go to my place for some tea now, or broth. Some broth would be better now. I'll only be a few moments now.
Mrs. Muldoon, don't bother.
She's gone. She'll be right back.
Alice.
Don't move. Lie here a moment. We found you here in front of the vestibule. You had fallen.
Oh, where was I?
We thought you were dead.
It must have been that I was. Oh, yes, I can only have died. You brought me to life. How?
And now I shall keep you.
Oh, keep me. Keep me. Keep me, Alice. But how did you know to find me?
I was uneasy. You were to have come. Do you remember? And you sent no word.
Oh, yes, I remember. I was still out there in my strange darkness. Where was it? What was it? I must have stayed there so long. So you knew of this, of what has happened.
I've known that you've been coming here.
Known?
Well, I believed it after our talk here.
That I'd persist.
That you'd see him.
Ah, but I didn't. There's somebody, some beast that I brought to bay, but it is not me.
No, thank heaven, it's not you. Of course, it wasn't to have been.
But it was. It was that. I was to have known myself.
I, too, saw you.
Saw me.
Saw him. It might have been at the same moment. In my dream again. He came back to me. I knew it for a sign that he had come to you.
He didn't come to me.
You came to yourself.
Now, yes, I've come to myself thanks to you. But this brute with his awful face, a black stranger, he's none of me, even as I might have been.
Isn't the whole point that you'd have been different?
As different as that.
Haven't you wanted to know exactly how different? But anyway, you appeared to me.
Like him?
Yes, a black stranger.
And how did you know it was I?
He told me you had seen him.
You liked him. You liked him, that horror.
I could have. He was no horror. I had accepted him.
Accepted?
I didn't disown him. I knew him. You, my dear, so cruelly didn't. You saw only his difference. Well, he was less dreadful to me. It may have pleased him that I pitied him.
Pitied?
He's been unhappy, ravaged.
And haven't I been unhappy? Am I not ravaged?
I don't say I like him better. But he's grim, he's worn. Things have happened to him. His glasses, I recognized the kind for his poor ruined sight. And his poor right hand.
And he has $1 million a year. He has $1 million a year. But he hasn't you.
And he isn't you. He isn't you.
Mr. Bryden. Oh, sir, you're all right again, I see. Now, shall I bring the tea to you here, or can you come outside?
We'll go outside, Mrs. Muldoon.
We're all right now.
Go ahead, Mrs. Muldoon. We'll follow. No, he isn't you. He isn't you.
That was The Jolly Corner by Henry James. You heard Eric Bowersfeld as Bryden and Pat Franklin as Alice. The technical production was by John Whiting, with music composed by Peter Winkler. The bassoon was performed by Bill Kaufman, and the story was adapted for radio by Eric Bowersfeld. And now, good night.
Phantoms of a world gone by speak again their immortal tale. What was it?
All right, then. What was it?
What was it? Nobody knows. But the house was haunted by something or somebody. The boarders here at Mrs. Dimity's boarding house didn't believe in ghosts either, myself included. But we were curious about them. That's why we voted to move into the old brownstone house on 49th Street. And once we were in, we were still convinced that ghosts don't venture abroad in a New York tenement building. The only one who wasn't quite convinced that ghosts exist only in storybooks was old Mrs. Dimity herself. But her favorite roomer, young, handsome Ned Saunders, and myself, I'm Dr. Hammond, we refused to believe the ghostly nonsense. Anne Mitchell, the young sculptress who lived there, was frankly curious, while the Countess Harkavy, a fortune-teller of some renown and a psychic of questionable fame, was delighted at the idea of living in a haunted house. That was in a business way, of course. It was around 11 o'clock at night when the boarders, who were then assembled in that dark, dreary living room, first heard what some claimed was a ghostly presence.
Listen to that, Dr. Hammond.
I hear it, Ned. It's an uncommon sort of sound for the wind.
That is not the wind, Dr. Hammond. It is the cries from the spirit world. I feel it in the marrow of my bones.
Oh, say, Countess, can't you feel things in a more comfortable place? Bone structures always struck me as a most uncomfortable place to have a feeling going on.
Listen, all of you. Listen.
Oh, skip it. Ned, will you pass me that magazine on the shelf next to you? I think any kind of reading will be preferable to listening to old psychic ears rambling.
Sure thing. Here you are, dear.
You really think this house is haunted, Countess?
Yes, I do.
It would be a fortunate thing for your business if the United States of America could be made ghost-conscious.
Dr. Hammond, you'll live to regret that remark. The Countess will take you seriously.
I am serious.
And talking of taking things seriously, when are you going to start taking me seriously, Anne?
When you start to make a living, Ned. Oh, someday I hope I won't have to try and sell my sculptures.
All art is conceived out of the fires of struggle.
Well, I'm tired of struggling. Oh, if I could just create something out of the ordinary for an art exhibit, I could make a couple of $100. I've been working 3 months for an idea, and I haven't done a thing.
My poor dear Anne, as long as you doubt the extraordinary, how can you create it?
She's got you there, Anne.
Yes, she has, Dr. Hammond.
Well, what would you suggest as a good subject for Anne to sculpt, Countess?
Well, a denizen of the other world, perhaps?
Oh, sure. That's rather a hot place for a girl to venture in order to sculpt the devil, isn't it?
Don't speak so lightly of His Satanic Highness. No one knows where the devil's hand may be next.
How about sculpting me, Anne? I'm an extraordinary young man.
That you are, darling.
Extraordinarily broke, at any rate.
Oh, the woes of the world revolve on that ugly stuff called money.
People take money much too seriously, Ned.
Well, frankly, Dr. Hammond, if I had some of it, I wouldn't take it at all seriously. I'd scatter it around the world like a veritable windmill.
Oh, frivolity. That's your trouble, my dear friends. Frivolity. You feed on it. Here in this very house is a poor, earthbound spirit, and yet you ignore it.
Come, Countess, you don't expect us to take it seriously?
I expect nothing.
What do you expect us to do? Call the spirit in and ask him to sit for me?
Possibly, Anne. Possibly.
Come, Countess, you're joking.
I have never been more serious in my life. I think we ought to hold a seance and command the spirits to enter the room.
That would be interesting, at least scientifically so.
Oh, nonsense, Doctor. Besides, Mrs. Dimity would never stand for it. Ever since she moved us into this house, she's been scared stiff of the very idea of spirits.
Have you seen the amulet she's been wearing?
Yes. She carries it around like a sword.
Why don't we ask her?
Oh, we were just talking about you, Mrs. Dimity.
Oh, dear. I tell you, I just can't stand being alone in my room. I just know something was in there with me, Anne. I just know it.
The spirits probably have been attracted to you, Mrs. Dimity. I've always felt you're strongly psychic.
Oh, don't say it, Countess. Don't even think about it. It was all a mistake, moving into this house. All a mistake. I've just never been as nervous. Dr. Hammond, feel my pulse. Feel it. It's practically non-pulse, so to speak.
Well, I wouldn't take it seriously, Mrs. Dimity. We all know there are no such things as spirits. You see, we've been talking about the ghost for so long that at times we half believe, but that's purely imagination.
It wasn't imagination at all, Dr. Hammond. You know very well there are only 5 of us living here. You 4 were downstairs, and I was alone upstairs, and, I did hear footsteps in the hall. I opened the door, and I felt something cold touch me.
Ah, you see, I knew it.
Oh, listen. Oh, it came from upstairs. Listen, all of you.
Ah, and was that also the wind, Dr. Hammond?
I don't know, Countess. What do you think, Ned?
I think the Countess' idea of a seance is a good practical suggestion. I'm all for it.
A seance? Oh, dear.
Yes, let's give it a try.
Well, we're all agreed.
Yes, come on, Les. I think it's a good
You're
idea.
in charge, Countess. Now tell us what to do.
Well, now, for the first thing, bring your chairs into a circle, please.
Oh, dear. I think I want back in the show.
Now, hold hands. Will someone turn off the lights?
I'll get the switch.
Good. Now we're in the dark. Quiet, please. Quiet while I summon the spirits. It is midnight, O spirits, midnight. Enter the portals of our room and speak to us. Speak to us. We are gathered to commune with you who have passed on. Withhold not your secrets. Speak. Speak. It is I, Countess Harkavy, asking you to descend to this mortal plane. Answer me. Answer me.
If my Uncle Ezekiel's in the room and wants to talk to me, I'd talk to him, Countess.
Yes, Mrs. Dimity.
Ned, stop squeezing my hand.
I'm not squeezing your hand, Anne.
Or whatever you're doing, stop doing
I'm not doing
it.
anything.
Ouch, doggone it.
What's the matter with you, Anne?
Oh, you're so coy, pinching me now.
I'm not pinching you. My hands are in my lap.
Well, who's ever sitting next to me? Stop it. Dr. Hammond.
I'm sitting across from you, Anne.
Mrs. Dimity.
Oh, dear. I wouldn't have the courage to squeeze anybody's hand at this point.
Ouch. Well, whoever it is. Turn on the light, somebody. Turn on the light.
No.
Somebody's got hold of my
No,
hand.
don't turn on the lights. The spirits have entered the room and are attracted to you, Anne. To you.
Oh, please turn on the lights, please.
I'll do it, Anne. I'll do it.
Oh, let go. Oh, there. Oh.
There's nobody sitting next to you. That's a vacant chair.
But I felt it.
Anne, did you imagine it?
Imagine what? That somebody squeezed my hand? I imagine nothing. Look at my hand. And tell me that's imagination.
What's here, darling? What? Dr. Hammond, look. Her hand is bruised.
Yes, it is. Pretty badly bruised. Countess, where were you sitting?
Exactly where I'm sitting now, Dr. Hammond, and I haven't moved. You had your chance to do something extraordinary, Anne, but you muffed it. A pity is all I can say. A great pity. The seance is ruined.
But, Countess, wait a minute.
What for? To try another seance and have you become hysterical all over again? Good night.
Dr. Hammond, is it possible that I really was holding the hand of something, or...
Anything's possible, Anne, but not very probable.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
I said not very probable, Mrs. Dimity. I think perhaps the Countess has been playing a trick on all of us.
It's a cute trick, Doctor. A pretty difficult one.
If she wasn't playing a trick, she shouldn't have been so upset when you turned on the lights, Ned.
Oh, Doctor, I think you've got a point there.
Nothing like a good dash of logic to take the cold chills out of my spine.
Well, how could the Countess do it, Doctor?
Well, Mrs. Dimity, psychic phenomena is the Countess's business. After all, she makes a living out of calling imaginary spooks from the outer world. I don't think it's very nice of us to try and pry into her secrets.
I hope you're right, Doctor. I do hope you're right.
Well, I wouldn't worry, Mrs. Dimity.
Well, I'm going upstairs to bed. I've had enough spooks to last me for years.
Oh, wait for me, Mrs. Dimity. I'll go up with you. Good night, Ned.
Good night, Anne.
Good night, Dr. Hammond. See you in the morning.
Good night, my dear. And don't worry about the spooks. They're purely harmless make-believe.
Oh, dear. I'll never sleep a wink, Anne.
Well, Doctor, what's the tongue-in-the-cheek look?
Oh. Ned, I'm afraid we've had our first touch of real psychic phenomena tonight.
But you just said
I didn't want to frighten the women.
And you believe this house is haunted?
Haunted? Well, I don't like the phrase, but in essence, that's the idea. I was wondering if you'd be interested in trying an experiment with me tonight.
Certainly, Doctor, anything.
But suppose you and I spend the next few nights down here. We'll turn off the lights and wait. Just wait. Perhaps we can invite some trouble. We waited that night through without sleeping, but nothing extraordinary happened, except for the fact that Mrs. Dimity's rocking chair kept rocking all night long, creaking and squeaking as it moved. But the wind could have been responsible for that. The next night and the next and the one after that, we kept our nightly vigil, creeping up to our rooms like thieves just before daylight broke, so that nobody would suspect our secret experiment. On the 5th night of our wait, we heard the rocking chair creaking, creaking, creaking.
Doctor.
Yes, Ned?
That rocking chair couldn't be moved by wind tonight. There isn't a breath of air stirring.
I noticed that, Ned. I wonder...
Listen.
Yes, the creaking stopped. Same as usual. I'll try to get some sleep.
I can't. I'm as nervous as a cat over this whole thing.
Yes, I'm jittery, too.
Ouch, let me...
What's the matter, Ned?
I don't know. Somebody's attacked me. Help me, Doctor. Help me. It's got its arms around my throat.
There, I feel it. We'll find out who this ghost is in a short time. There, I've got his arms, Ned.
My throat. Let go of my throat. There. It's hurt. Can you hang on to him alone, Doctor?
I think so, but he's as strong as an ox. No, you don't.
Listen to him, will you, Doctor? His voice certainly doesn't sound human.
Turn on the lights, Ned, while I hang on to him. We'll find out who this practical prankster is.
I'm afraid to let him go, Doctor.
I can handle him, Ned. You turn on the lights. Hurry, Ned, hurry.
All right, of course. There you are. Go ahead. Doctor, where is he?
He's right in front. I've got him by the arms. I'm hanging on to it. Well, this is amazing.
Amazing, Doctor. Well, we can't see it. It's invisible.
Help me, Ned. He's trying to escape. Help me. If I could only see him.
There we are. I've got it. I've got it. What is it, Doctor? What is this thing?
What was it? I didn't know as I held the grisly thing in my arms. It struggled and sobbed and moaned exactly as a beast would struggle and moan. An invisible beast. That was the horror of it. An invisible beast. I sent Ned to the basement of the old brownstone to get some stout rope. At least we could prevent this horror from escaping. That's what I thought then. Well, Ned returned shortly from the basement and opened the door.
Here you are, Dr. Hammond.
Oh, quickly, Ned. Bind its legs. I can't hang on to it much longer. Not as young as I used to be.
All right, Dr. Almatic. Somehow I try to hold him on the floor.
Yes, of course. There you are, Ned. Now, quickly. Its feet are still for the minute.
There. I got the rope about them. Look.
Huh?
A perfect loop around nothing but empty air. Hold him and I'll bind the rope around him.
Oh, quickly, Ned.
There we are. That covers his feet. And I'll bring it up here and around his legs.
Here, give me the rope and I'll bind his hands.
All right. We're getting him bound up like an Egyptian mummy.
There, that does it. What a relief to be able to let that awful thing go.
All right, I'll take the rope now, Doctor, and bind it to this chair. He won't get away now, I'll guarantee that.
It isn't very large, is it?
No, about the size of a small boy.
Yeah, but what is it?
Have you ever encountered anything like this before?
Well, frankly, Ned, never. Look at my hands, bitten and bruised. I wonder if I'll ever be able to move them again.
What are we going to do with the darn thing now?
I don't think that's our responsibility, Ned. I think we'd better call the boarders together and let them in on the secret.
Would you like me to get them, Doctor?
Yes, wake them up. But don't tell them why. Just ask them to come down here, and I'll throw this rug over the chair so that they won't see the ropes right away.
Don't ask so many questions, everybody. Dr. Hammond will explain everything.
Oh, good evening, Dr. Hammond. Have you possibly discovered that psychic phenomena does exist?
Come in, Countess. Come in, everybody. Don't be afraid, Mrs. Dimity.
What's that?
I'll explain it in a minute.
Explain it, Dr. Hammond?
Sit down, everybody, please. No, Mrs. Dimity, not in the rocking chair.
Oh, dear me.
I'm afraid we're in for a revelation this evening. Ned, please close the door.
Right.
Strange are the ways of the world.
Yes, Countess, the ways of the world are very strange. Mrs. Dimity, and the Countess has been correct about this house. There is something in it.
Oh, what do you mean?
There's nothing to be frightened of, Mrs. Dimity.
Oh, spirits are often kind. Indeed, they're friendlier than many mortals.
This isn't exactly a spirit, Countess.
What do you mean?
Exactly what I say. It's a beast of some kind.
Oh, the doctor, is it in this room?
Mrs. Dimity, please. Yes, Anne, it's in this room, in that rocking chair. I threw a rug over it.
Oh, unfortunate spirit.
If you wish, Countess, remove the rug.
Yes, of course.
Why, where is it?
It's there. You can see the ropes being held in place by it.
What kind of a hoax are you trying to play on me, Dr. Hammond?
It is not a hoax. There's a living, breathing something bound in that chair. But it's invisible.
Oh, why, that's incredible.
It's more than incredible.
Would you mind if I touched it?
I don't see why I should. It's not my beast. The problem is, what are we going to do with it? What do you suggest, Mrs. Dimity? Mrs. Dimity!
Oh, she's fainted, Dr. Hammond. I'll get a smelling salts right here in the desk drawer.
Oh, I felt it. I felt it, Anne. I felt it. A captured spirit. I must tell my co-worker, Dr. Zarcox, right away. He'll be so thrilled, so thrilled.
I'm not sure that we ought to tell anybody about it. Are you, Dr. Hammond?
Ned's quite right. We should not.
Oh, but Dr. Zarcox is the only living person constantly in touch with the spiritual night and day. Day and night, constantly.
The smelling salts should be in here someplace. Oh, here they are.
Until we find out exactly what it is, I don't think we ought to divulge the secret. Heaven knows what we've stumbled into.
You're right, Ned.
Here, Mrs. Dimity, take a deep breath of this.
And how do you propose going about finding out what it is?
Breathe deeply, Mrs. Dimity.
Well, I was thinking it might be possible for Anne to make a plaster cast of it.
Oh, that's a gay idea, Ned. Breathe deeply, Mrs. Dimity. You'll be all right.
That's quite a good idea, as a matter of fact.
No, you'll hold it while I make a cast, huh? If it happens to bite me with a pair of invisible teeth, that'll be my word.
No, being a doctor, I shall use a little chloroform and put it to sleep for a while. We'll be able to make a perfect cast.
Mrs. Dimity, are you all right?
Oh, I'll never be all right again.
Well, Anne, are you willing to give it a try?
Oh, I suppose so, Ned. I'll prepare the plaster right away.
There we are, Anne. The chloroform has worked perfectly. Whatever it is, it's asleep. Before you start with the plaster, I should like to listen to his heart with a stethoscope.
Certainly, Doctor.
Normal. A little faster than is normal for a human being, but maybe we're not dealing with a human being.
Yes, Doctor, that's very possible. Ned, would you hand me that container near you?
Certainly, Anne. Here you are.
Thanks, Ned. Well, Dr. Hammond, are you ready?
Yes, Anne, whenever you are.
You might as well start. 2:00. We ought to be through by 7.
And so Anne started to work to cover that invisible form with moist plaster. We watched her spellbound. The hideousness of the rough object which soon met our eyes was appalling. Anne's hands shook perceptibly as she forced herself to complete what she had started. Minutes changed into hours. The mold was completed, and we had a rough idea of this figure. Then Anne allowed the mold to dry. By morning, we had a rough facsimile of the invisible beast. How can I describe what it looked like, when it looked like nothing so much as a demon out of hell itself? Yes, shaped like a man with long, sinewy arms, but it was small, only 4 feet or so high. Its muscular development was amazing. And the face looked like a cannibal's, a demon. Cruel, tiny eyes, a tiny nose, and a twisted, a horribly long mouth, and sharp, shiny teeth. The first rays of light broke through the window, and I realized that the effects of the chloroform were wearing off. And... Watch out, Ned, he's awake.
I got him, Doctor. You better help me.
Yes, of course. Here, we'll hold him together. And...
Yes, Dr. Hammond?
We'll hold him down, and you bind his legs with the cord.
Yeah. Get that rope around his legs. Good girl, Ann. That's it.
Ow! He bit me. Your arm, darling. It's bleeding.
Don't mind my arm. Find the leg.
Okay.
Hurry up, Ann.
That's the girl. Now slip the rope around him and pull it good and tight.
All right. There we are. Give me the rope, Ann. I'll secure his arm.
Ned, look at your arm. Oh, Doctor, he's badly bitten.
Don't bother about me now, darling. We can't let this beast loose on the matter.
That face you've done, Ann, looks like the face of a man-eater.
Yeah, it does. Give me a hand, Dr. Hammond. We'll put it back in the chair and tie it.
Okay, Ned, now, 1, 2, lift.
There. Now, tie the darn thing there.
What do you think we ought to do with it now?
I don't know. You're the doctor.
Well, I think we all need some sleep. First, I'll tend to that arm of yours, Ned, and then we'll leave the thing here for a while.
Doctor, do you think we dare leave it here quite safely?
Well, judging from the way Ned's got it tied up, I think so. Not even a spirit could get out of those ropes. Come on, Ned, I want to take a look at that arm of yours.
Oh, I'm tired. I'll leave the little statue in here till morning. You know, Doctor, that makes an interesting study, doesn't it?
Yes, quite an interesting one. Extraordinary piece of work, one might say. Well, good night, Anne. Come on, Ned, let's get that arm bandaged. We'll all think more clearly in the morning. We thought we could think more clearly after some sleep. And so the days went by. Ned and Anne and I stayed with that invisible beast constantly. I took test after test. Its heart condition, its breathing, every test I took baffled me completely. For this invisible beast reacted to every test exactly as a reptile would react. Or to be more specific, a python, a type of snake which swallows an animal or a man whole and then digests it. As the days passed, we realized that since this was living matter, it must eat. We tempted it with every kind of food imaginable, tried force-feeding it, but the animal never swallowed one bite of food. And then one evening, all of us were collected in the living room when those horrible sounds started.
Oh, I tell you, Ned, it's hungry.
Ann, darling, we've tried feeding.
But you've got to get it out of this house. I can't take it any longer.
Capturing a spirit will evoke the anger of the gods. My advice to you is to let it go.
That's not very good advice, Countess. Whatever this is, it would be fairly dangerous news.
Oh, isn't there anything we can feed it? It must be suffering horribly, Doctor. No food or water for 2 weeks.
Yes, Anne, there is something we can feed it, but unfortunately or fortunately, we can't.
What are you talking about, Doctor?
Human flesh, Ned. This creature is a man-eater, an invisible man-eater. There's only one thing for us to do. Call the police and the medical society and turn it over to them. There's nothing more we can do.
Oh, you'll regret this, Doctor. You'll regret it. You can't evoke the anger of the spirit world without payment in full.
Anne, will you make the call?
Certainly, Doctor.
I'll go with you, darling.
Don't tell them anything about it. Just ask them to come over here immediately. And so, gentlemen, Anne called you and brought you over here. I've told you the complete story of the monster from the very beginning.
Well, Dr. Hammond, as a member of the police force, I don't mean to doubt you. But where is this invisible monster?
It died of hunger 10 minutes before you arrived, Sergeant.
Well, where is it?
On the floor, here, next to my foot.
Huh?
You can feel it even if you can't see it. Here, put your hand down here.
All right. Sergeant, feel this. It feels like a dead man. I tell you it does. Look at that.
Sure, Doctor. What kind of a trick are you trying to play on it?
Trick, Sergeant? Take my word for it, it's no trick. You felt it yourself.
Many people know how to make a mass of material appear invisible. Chemistry can give you a lot of explanations of that kind of a hoax.
It's no hoax, gentlemen, on my word of honor. It's no hoax.
Tell us a better story. Come on, boys, let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here.
We enjoyed your fairy tale, Doctor, but we can't swallow that one
But,
whole.
gentlemen, ask any one of us in this room. I swear to you, it's the truth. Look in the corner at that statuette. That's an exact replica of the invisible beast.
Now I get it. You're trying to get some free publicity for the art exhibition at the museum.
No, gentlemen. I made that plaster cast myself from the invisible monster. Dr. Hammond's telling you the truth.
Oh, yeah? Well, if it's the truth, what was it?
What was it? Frankly, gentlemen, I don't know what it was.
From the time-worn pages of the past, you have heard, what was it? Bell keeper, toll the bell.
And now, a tale well calculated to keep you in suspense.
Friday the 13th? Unlucky? Nonsense. Rank superstition, that's all.
Listen now to Act One of Friday, starring Ivor Francis, and written especially for Suspense by Jonathan Bundy.
Look at it down there. Most beautiful little harbour this side of Clovelly and Plymouth O. And so peaceful and quiet down there now, you'd hardly believe that a few years ago we had us one of the busiest ports on all the coast of England. A high deal of trade went in and out of this port in those days, sometimes 3 and 4 ships a week. There was always them as laid over, too, and the hopes of picking up a cargo, unexpected, and fishing boats, a plenty of them. But mostly it was trade. Ships and sailing men from all the 4 corners of the earth. And I was part of it. A few years ago, did I say? Well, I guess to be more exact was more like 40 years ago. Long time for men. Shipping agent, I was. Not a single piece of pottery or sack of grain or bale of goods that didn't go through these hands of mine. Aye. Or through our hands, that is. You see, I had me a partner, Philip Morley by name. Fine young chap he was, too. Why, in 7 or 8 years, he knew most as much about that business as I did.
There we are, Beckham. We're all ready for the Lorenta now. I've made all the arrangements, and she can start taking on cargo first thing in the morning.
Fine, Philip, my boy, excellent. But I'd say it's about time now, wouldn't you? Why a master like Captain Cunningham should have had such trouble filling out a crew, I never understand.
Something about the sailing date, he said.
Oh? Well, I don't see why. Well, now, I shall be off to London to arrange the insurance for her.
Some superstition it was.
That superstition?
Yes, sir.
Bah, Tommy rot. And, Philip, you know that as well as I do. Of course, the men behind the master, superstitious, most of them, and omens and things and black cats across the deck. Aye, carrying a hare's foot for luck, too. All right. They're kind of simple and amusing, and they're harmless. But this, well, if you ask me, my lad, it's carrying things just a bit too far. It's ridiculous. Well, isn't it, lad?
Well, of course, there was the Bristol Queen, Beckham.
The Bristol Queen and 100 others that left for the open sea on all days of the week.
Well, I know, sir.
No, Philip, it's all foolishness. Foolish superstition and nothing else. And don't you ever believe otherwise. So I drove me up to London town, the big insurance exchange. Biggest in the world it was, with more than 200 brokers sitting around their tables and all in touch with what was going on by the means of that marvelous invention, the telegraph. And I talked with my old friend, Mr. Edward Etherington, who handled all my problems back those 40 years ago.
Here we are now, Mr. Beckham. A quill and plenty of ink.
Good.
Now, you say the vessel is named the Lorenta.
Aye, Mr. Edrington, the Lorenta. One of the finest ships ever put to sea, sir.
Oh, yes, I believe I recall having insured her once before, on a sailing out of Southampton.
No doubt you have, sir.
Still under Captain Halsey Cunningham?
Yes, sir, the same.
Good. Now the value of the cargo, Mr. Beckham?
£15,000.
Oh, 15,000, eh?
Aye, sir. We're loading her with finished woolen goods to be carried to the port of Philadelphia in America.
Good. It's surprising how much the trade of that young country has increased recently.
Ah, it is.
Yes, especially with so much political strife between its north and south.
Aye, but Mr. Etherington, I confidentially predict that one day the international trade with America will be second only to the trade with England.
Oh, yes, perhaps so. Well, now, you wish full coverage?
Full coverage, sir.
Very well. £15,000 in finished woolens.
Aye.
And the destination is the port of... Oh, by the way, Beckham, have you set the sailing date?
That I have, Mr. Etherington.
And what is it, please?
April the 21st.
Let me see now. That would be...
No need to look, sir. That'll be Friday after the next Friday week.
Ah, yes, Friday? On a Friday?
That it is.
Oh, no. Then I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
Eh? Now, what's the matter with that?
I trust you aren't jesting, Mr. Beckham.
Jesting? Hardly.
You mean you don't know?
I certainly don't.
Well, then I'll tell you what's the matter with it. No, wait, listen.
Now, you listen to me, Mr. Etherington. I won't...
Listen!
Gentlemen, I have a dispatch of great importance. The six-masted schooner Tremaine, long overdue at the port of Southampton. She is now known to have been completely wrecked in a severe storm off Basel Reef. All hands, all cargo, lost.
There's your answer, Mr. Beckham.
Oh, it is, eh?
Aye. Because the Tremaine left her last port of call most ill-advisedly, sir. Left her port of call on a Friday.
Well, now, don't be absurd, Mr. Etherington. Surely you don't think her sailing on a Friday had anything to do with this?
Think, man. I know it did. And so do all the rest of the gentlemen here in the exchange.
Ah, nonsense.
Is it? Then what of the Klemper Hall that foundered in a hurricane off the coast of South America?
But that was in...
She sailed on a Friday, too.
I know, but...
And the Marley Kay that perished off the coast of Africa.
Look, wait a minute.
And the Capricano off the Azores. And the Dorset.
Don't you see?
The Lee Cambria, the Plymouth Flyer. You name them, there have been dozens of them. All of them sailed on a Friday, Beckham, and they're all at the bottom of the sea.
And do you mean to tell me, Mr. Etherington, that you... or any other supposedly intelligent person...
I tell you, Beckham, there is an unholy curse on Friday sailing.
Ah, come on now.
Well, ask the sailors. They know it. And most of them, those that have their wits about them, wouldn't sign on for a Friday clearance if their very lives depended on it.
Rubbish.
Most of the masters of our shipping fleet know it, too. But I suppose you didn't mention a possible Friday sailing to the men of the Lorenta?
Of course I did.
And they all agreed to it?
Yes, every one of them. Well, all but a stupid young midshipman who was easy enough replaced, and one of the galley boys. Well, does that answer your question?
No. Can't you understand, sir? Can't you see the disaster you're courting by letting that ship go out on a Friday?
No, I cannot. Believe me, sir, I've never heard anything so completely silly in all my life.
Silly?
Yes, utterly ridiculous.
Well... that is not the way the Admiralty feels about it, Beckham.
The Admiralty?
Aye. And you can mark my words, sir. Before this 12-month is over, there'll be an edict against Friday sailings, a royal edict.
Ah, Tommy rot. Now fix up these air papers so I can have my coverage for the Lorenta. Well, will you do it?
No, Beckham, not I.
Now you look here.
Not unless you change that date.
Very well. Then I shall have to take my business to someone else.
I'm sorry.
Not only now, but hereafter.
That is up to you.
But you mark my word, Edward Etherington. The Lorenta will sail on a Friday, and she'll be living proof of what a fool you've just made of yourself.
And so it was that I betook myself across the room to another of the insurance men, a younger man, intelligent-looking chap who I was certain would be above any such childish superstition.
Oh, yes, sir.
Beckham's my name, Henry Beckham.
What? Oh, yes, of course, Mr. Beckham. I've seen you here many times. My name is Archcroft, sir.
Mr. Archcroft?
Won't you sit down, please, sir?
Thank you.
Rather a regular client of Mr. Edward Etherington, aren't you?
Let us say rather I was.
Was?
Aye, but no longer. It may surprise you, after all these years of my dealing with Mr. Etherington, but I've now decided to let one of you other gentlemen handle my insurance business.
Why, of course, Mr. Beckham. And I give you my word that you'll never regret it. It will be an honor and a privilege to service your account, sir.
Thank you.
And is there anything that I can do for you here and now?
There is,
today?
Mr. Archcroft, there is. I need insurance on a cargo and vessel that's sailing to America shortly.
Oh, fine, sir. And what is the name of the carrier?
The Lorenta.
Oh, yes, good ship, sir. Yes. Captain Halsey Cunningham, I believe.
That's right.
And the cargo, sir?
£15,000 worth of finished woolens.
£15,000 in... Oh, yes. There we are. And the sailing date, sir?
Friday, April...
Friday, sir.
That's right.
I'm sorry, sir, but I cannot handle it.
Now, look here, young man.
Unless, of course, you change that date. Don't you see, Mr. Beckham?
I see nothing. Silly, ridiculous superstition. That's all it is. I'll go elsewhere.
Friday? Oh, no, you can't mean it, Mr. Beckham.
I certainly do. Friday the 21st.
And I'm sorry, but the answer is no. I'm sorry, Mr. Beckham.
Friday? Sailing on a Friday, did you say?
That's exactly what I said.
Oh, then I'm sorry, Mr. Beckham.
Now, just a minute, you. Just a minute.
Friday? No, sir, I wouldn't think of it.
Oh, you wouldn't?
No, get someone else, if you can.
Sorry, not I. Not for a Friday sailing.
Oh, a stupid...
Sorry.
Superstition, you hear me? It's all nothing but a superstition. Sheer, stupid superstition. By heaven, I'll show 'em. I'll show 'em if it kills me. Hard-headed businessmen, they call themselves. But because of this nonsensical belief in a curse on Friday sailings, they turned me down. Well, then, I'll tell you what I did. And I don't deny that by the time I got back here from London, back to all the old familiar things that have been so close to me so many years, well, I don't deny that more than once my determination began to waver a bit, as you might say. But ahead I went with my plan.
Beckham, what are you up to, man?
Philip, my friend, I'm selling out.
I don't understand.
I'm selling out to you. To you, Philip.
Well, what on earth for?
Well, you've done well for Beckham and Morley. You've done well for yourself. That means you've saved enough to buy me out. Yeah, I've seen that. And so I'm selling out to you.
But why?
Because I have need of cash, a lot of cash.
Well, has something gone...
No, boy. Nothing's gone wrong. But if you'll buy me out, it'll give me what I need to finance the building of a ship.
A ship?
Yeah, to prove once and for all the absurdness of this Friday sailing superstition. Huh. And anything else of the sort that's connected with Friday. Once and for all.
Oh, I see.
So if I can have your check, Philip, I'll make arrangements with Mr. MacBarskin, the shipbuilder, on, the day after tomorrow.
The day... That's Friday.
That's right. Friday, as ever was. Yes. Yes, excellent, Mr. MacBarskin. And now then, build her as exactly as you've sketched her here, and she'll be exactly what I want.
Very well. And if I understand you correctly, Mr. Beckham, you'd like me to begin construction right away?
Just as soon as possible, provided that you keep with the schedule we discussed.
Yes, of course, the schedule. Well, that means we can start a week from today. So if you'll affix your signature to this contract and the date. Right here, please.
Aye. Henry J. Beckham.
And the date, please.
Aye. Friday, April the 28th. And so it was. We'd made the contract on Friday, April the 28th. On Friday, May the 5th, began the building of the ship. My ship. And true to his word, Malcolm McBaskin tended himself to every detail, and like myself, made certain there was no deviation, not by a single day, from the schedule that we had set. The date for laying of the keel was a Friday, and it was met. The frames were begun, the ribs and plating, and the deck structure, the caulking, the finishing, the painting. Every single step in her construction was begun on a Friday. And so it went on, through May and June, July, August, and September. And then finally, on a beautiful morning at the end of September...
Oh, she's a beauty, all right. Just wait until they get the canvas on her.
That won't be until after this launching. I understand Beckham has done all this by himself. Certainly hope she proves his point.
Hey, here's the pretty girl up there with him. Wait now, they're getting ready. Wait now.
All ready now, my dear?
Yes, I guess so, Uncle Henry.
Very well, then. Now, hold the bottle tightly, and don't worry, when it breaks, the wrapping will keep it from hurting you, you see? So strike it with all your might.
But won't it splash all over my nasty dress that you got for me?
Oh, well, I'll buy you a dozen more, my dear. All prettier than this one. Now then, all ready now?
All ready, I guess.
Good. Then speak up loud and clear. Go on, dear. Just the way I told you to. Long may you sail...
Oh, yes. Long may you sail the seven seas, good ship.
That's right. And long...
And long may you prosper, each cargo richer than the last.
And may you serve to show to all mankind that the only truth is truth itself.
I still don't understand what that means, Uncle Henry.
You're doing fine, my dear. Now go right ahead. And now this day...
All right. And now this day, the 22nd day of September, a Friday.
That's right. Go on.
I christen thee to be known herever after as the good ship Friday.
Aye, there she was. My ship, the Friday, sliding down the ways, gliding as graceful as a swan, into the waters that would caress her for the rest of her natural life. And then, as she sat there bobbing gently on the tide, I knew I was right. That I now can prove I was right. As soon as she was fitted with her canvas, a matter now of only days, but one thing would remain. Aye, the fitting climax to my plan. The fitting final proof.
In just a moment, the concluding act of Suspense. You know, there's a lot of talk, sensible talk, about driving carefully. But there are times when you shouldn't drive at all. Don't drive when you're drowsy. Go off the road and rest for a little while. Don't drive when you're angry or upset. People are apt to take out their anger on the car and cause a serious accident. And never drive if you've been drinking. Obeying these don'ts may save your life or someone else's.
And now my ship, in order to fulfill its destiny, required not only the best of crews, from first mate to cabin boy, but the finest master I could find. A master truly worthy of her, and who would also meet my, yes, I'll admit it, my rather unusual requirements. And when I did find him, I knew that he was the man.
And let me assure you again, Mr. Beckham, I deem it a privilege to take the command of this fine ship of yours.
And I was certain you'd feel that way about it, Captain. Now, as for the sailing date, to begin our maiden voyage.
Any time you say, Mr. Beckham. Immediately, if you like.
Immediately? Aren't you forgetting the schedule?
Oh, of course.
And always remember this, Captain.
Aye, sir.
I selected you to be the master of my ship because of your excellent record and reputation. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
But also, and more important, Captain, to prove once and for all the utter fallaciousness of that absurd superstition.
Absolutely.
Now, you must understand that, Captain. You must understand that. How important that is to me.
I do.
You must understand that that is my only reason for having undertaken all this and for having selected only you.
And I do understand, Mr. Beckham. I do understand.
I'm glad you do. Captain Friday. And finally, then, the day. And there she was, my fine new ship, the Friday, conceived on a Friday, built on a pattern of Fridays, christened and launched on a Friday, under the command of Captain Friday. The day, Friday, October the 13th, under a clear blue sky, proud in a new paint and polished brass and billowing canvas, with flags and pennants flying, the good ship Friday, under Captain Friday, sailed out of the harbor on a maiden voyage and sailed on a Friday. Thousands of people who'd heard of her and what she meant. Thousands thronged the piers to wish her bon voyage and cheer her on her way, to wish her Godspeed. Bells rang and whistles blew in her honor. In my honor, for here at last was living proof beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the silly, ridiculous, childish superstition about Friday being unlucky was indeed a superstition and nothing else. I'd staked my everything on her, all my money, yes, almost my soul. And now, before the doubters, before the world, I'd proved that I was right. I'd won. Except for one thing. The ship was never heard of again. The ship was never heard of again.
Suspense. You've been listening to Friday, starring Ivor Francis, and written especially for Suspense by Jonathan Bundy. Suspense is produced and directed by Bruno Zerato Jr., music supervision by Ethel Huber. Featured in tonight's story were William Redfield as Morley, Robert Dryden as Etherington, Mercer McLeod as Captain Friday, Lawson Zerby as Archcroft, and Hetty Galen as the girl. Also in our cast were Bill Lipton, Herb Duncan, and Dave Gilbert. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank Radio TV Daily and the more than 400 radio and TV critics and columnists who just voted Suspense the dramatic show of the year on radio. Listen again next week when we return with The Man Who Went Back to Save Lincoln. Another tale well calculated to keep you in suspense. Heavenly Days, it's Richard Hayes, Monday through Fridays on the CBS Radio Network.